Hello and welcome to the Unlocking Behaviour Change Podcast, the show all about psychology and changing behaviour. My name is Jamie West. I'm a writer, musician and performer, and I'm joined by Professor Emeritus of UCL, University College London, Robert West. How are you doing?
I'm good, Jamie. Good as always. One day I won't be, and we'll have to cancel the whole thing.
One day you'll be dead and I'll say, how are you doing? And it will just be silent. Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Or we'll do it through a Ouija board.
Yeah.
Okay, so today I want to talk about experts and how we deal with expert evidence, what counts as evidence, because we live in an age, as everyone goes on and on and on about, of fake news and AI manufactured images and videos and all kinds of information on the internet from all different kinds of sources. So how can we possibly parse this information? P-A-R-S-E. That's the word. Parse. How can we understand? How can we make sense of it? How can we sift it? So, yeah, let's start with that. When it comes to experts, what should be our mindset?
Well, this is a very big question. And let me start my response by saying, and some of the listeners will already know this, that I was supposedly an expert on a committee called SPI-B, S-P-I-B, not S-P-Y -B, which was the Behavioral Science Advisory Group to the UK government on COVID during the acute stage of the COVID pandemic, which, in case anyone is not aware, is still with us, of course. It has become chronic, and people obviously still dying from it, and it's still causing a lot of issues, but not to the same degree as obviously it was in the early stages. Anyway, so I was an expert, and I was one of quite a lot of experts on behavioral science, advising on issues to do with behavior and how the government could encourage, support, promote behaviors that would prevent infection and deal with the consequences of all the terrible things that we had to go through and that people had to go through in order to make sure that the virus didn't overwhelm the country and cause what would have been, according to experts, up to 700,000 deaths. We ended up with fewer than that, but we still ended up with a very, very large number of deaths. Now, why was I an expert, and why should anyone believe anything that I had to say on the subject? I am and was a behavioral scientist, but I was not a specialist in infection control. And some of the experts on the group were, and a lot of us weren't. And so we were applying broader behavioral science principles or things that we'd gleaned from other areas of behavioral science and the work that we did to these topics. And that was necessary because there just simply weren't the kind of specialists in that particular area in sufficient numbers available to be able to say, yes, this is the work that we do. So the expertise there was coming from a broader base, and it wasn't specific to that topic. So the question then becomes, why should anyone believe anything that I had to say on the subject? Why should I even feel qualified to...
Do you want me to ask that? I can ask that question.
Yeah, go on.
Why should anyone believe what you have to say, Robert?
Well, funnily enough, it was a question that, was raised of behavioral science experts. And there were people, including people in government, who said, why should one believe anything that a so-called behavioral scientist has to say? Because behavioral science is just bogus. And I think there's no sort of black and white type of answer to that. The answer, I think, lies in the matter of degree. there are insights and lessons that can be learned from other areas that can be applied to a given area, like infection control. And that can provide, genuine insights that you just simply couldn't get if you just, use your own common sense. An example in this area was the extent to which people, an understanding of why people would be breaking the rules with regard to going out and going to work and so on when they're infected. And so we commissioned, and people did research to try and find that out. And that was using a methodology that had been used in other areas. And so we found that actually, in the vast majority of cases, when people were going out and spreading the infection, they weren't doing it because they were bad people and they didn't care. They were doing it because in their eyes they had to, because they had to make a living, they had to get on with their lives and do things, because the government support that was made available to them wouldn't have been able to cover them, for them to be able to look after their families and so on. Now, we pointed that out. The government obviously didn't take any notice of us in that case, like they didn't take any notice of a lot of the experts that were advising them. But that was something that arose out of, and this is what I'm really getting to, arose out of evidence collected using a rigorous methodology, interpreted by people who are used to interpreting that kind of evidence and can draw on experience and models and understanding from related areas. So it's a long answer, but essentially you should believe experts to the extent that they have the knowledge, the skills, and the methodologies to draw on to provide answers to the sorts of questions that you're seeking. The problem that people face is that in lots of cases, they're not in any real position to make a judgment about whether the expert does have those qualities. Because lots of people out there will call themselves doctor or professor, or they'll even have PhDs and so on.
Dr. John, the New Orleans pianist, not really a doctor.
Yes, but great pianist.
Great pianist, maybe, and Professor Longhair, also a New Orleans pianist, also not a professor.
So doesn't that just illustrate my point? That
they make doctors and professors make really good pianists. New Orleans pianists,
that is the main point. So you can't, how do you judge? And I think what I'm going to say is you should never just accept someone's expertise. You should always have in the back of your mind, this person may not know the things that they're claiming that they know, which is not then to go all the other way, which some people do and say, well, you don't need experts. Experts are just bogus and you can't trust anyone. That would be obviously utterly foolish. So as in so many things in decision-making, you have to form a judgment, a quantitative judgment of the level of confidence that you can place. And then you should act on the advice you're given, bearing in mind what that level of confidence is. So if I say I go to a group of suppliers or consultants on solar panels, and they come in with various bits of advice about what kind of battery I should get, whether I should get microinverters or all the rest of it, what kind of panels I should get, and all the rest of it. I would take that and I would say, okay, fine. This is all interesting information, and I will go along with this to an extent, but I will always be ready to get another opinion or to question or to come back on something, because I know that as providers of solar panels and so on, you have your own particular vested interests and you have your own expertise and so on. So a long answer to the question, but it's such an important area, and it's so important that people take this quantitative view on their level of confidence and act accordingly.
And of course, it very much depends on how important the decision you're making or the advice you're taking from the expert is, because it may be the case that you're taking advice from a celebrity who is just talking in an interview about, I don't know, their sleep habits or their diet or something like that. These are quite common ways in which we hear about possible changes to our lifestyles. And if it's a big change to your diet, it may cause a big issue for you. You know, if you're going to cut out a food group, for example, you know, that may have, or you're going to cut out solid foods or something, you know, these are real things that people do, which seems like a bad idea on the surface of it, and very often is. So it does, you know, but there are other things where someone gives you a bit of advice. Oh, if it's like a writing tip, you know, oh, if you were trying to write a novel, try this. Well, you may as well, if you think it sounds like a good idea, you can try it. And the risk is very, very low. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve.
It does, whether your decision is irrevocable as well. All the other things that we've covered over the episodes about the nature of the decision and the frame and so on. But you're absolutely right. You know, the importance of the decision makes a big difference. And what's really interesting to me about these health tips and so on, and things like advice on vaccination and so on, which is obviously quite topical at the moment because, all sorts of, frankly, very bad advice is being put out even by people who, you'd imagine might have some claim to authority on the subject, but mostly don't. But what's really interesting is the extent to which people will discount the expertise of the large body of medical opinion and scientific evidence and so on, and be surprisingly willing to accept the advice of people who actually don't have expertise. And I just wonder, it is a bit baffling, but I just wonder then about the extent to which this issue of trust goes to people's broader psyche in relation to their belief in authority, their belief in medicine, their belief in government, and so on. And if I didn't believe that what I'm reading in scientific papers was honestly presented, and they were just making it up, then of course, all these randomized trials, all this data, all this evidence would be just, to me, something that I would discount. Whereas if I believed my friend who is some sort of
YouTuber
or a guru on something, or self-proclaimed guru, and they're the kind of person I feel affinity with and I identify with, then I'm going to believe them. And maybe that this is it. So much of it that goes down to one's sort of trust in authority, which admittedly authority hasn't always covered itself in glory on that.
And I think that's where your point about the degree to which you invest trust in an expert is so crucial, because as we go on and on about, we often flip to all or nothing thinking, I trust you completely or nothing, or you failed me once, therefore, or I tried some advice from the doctor and it didn't work and they've let me down. And of course, that is not to be discounted. If someone has a negative experience with their GP or whatever, I mean, most people have extremely positive experiences. I put myself in that bracket, just to be clear.
Me too.
But, things happen. There are side effects to medicines, and it can affect you in ways that you weren't completely made aware of. Things do go wrong. The systems are far from infallible, but I take the view that you're sort of, if you look on something like the NHS website, broadly speaking, this is a very, very trustworthy website for me to get my information from. And a TikTok video, broadly speaking, is a very, very untrustworthy source.
That is a good heuristic. That is a good heuristic. As you say, it's a matter of degree, and one must always keep that element of doubt, and it's not even necessarily that the expert is trying to deceive you. In many, many cases, they honestly believe the things that they're saying. Even the YouTubers and the TikTokers, obviously, in some cases, they're just out to sort of con you out of your money and things like that, or to get fame and be contrarian and so on. But in a lot of cases, people genuinely are enthusiasts for the things that they're proposing, and they themselves have been conned, or they themselves have formed beliefs from experience that are just not warranted. So it's not to say that these sort of false advice is coming out of necessarily a place of sort of desire to mislead people. But I think that it's also a big, it gets more complicated when you've got, real experts, I would say, people with genuine expertise who are clever people, who've done the studies and so on, but who allow their own, I don't know, it's probably putting it strong, whose beliefs are being shaped by this thing that we talk about a lot in certainly in clinical medicine, and in it should be in science generally, which is the conflict of interest, the competing interests, some affiliation with an organization that you feel attached to that takes a particular view, financial relationship with an organization such as a pharmaceutical company or whatever. And this is a huge issue for people in science and in economics. I mean, economists, strangely to me, don't seem to take conflicts of interest as seriously as we do in sort of public health. And they blooming well should, because economics is so potentially rife with competing interests affecting people's judgments and advice. So even the sort of the science can be influenced, and it comes back to this thing that I said at the beginning, you've reiterated, and I'm going to reiterate again, which is that it's all about how confident you should be in the advice that you're getting, and being always prepared, no matter who it's from, to say, let me just check that, or I will take that under advisement, or yes, I'll go with that for now, but I'm also going to be aware that it might not be true and take precautions as required.
So in a way, we're talking about a valuable, a useful kind of skepticism.
We are. And one way of construing that is a phrase that I have to say I've tried it out on a few people, and so far it hasn't got much traction. So I'm hoping maybe it can get some traction with this podcast, which is the power to disbelieve. The power to disbelieve. And that actually came to me because, as a lot of people will know, my favorite band is King Crimson, and they had a lovely album called The Power to Believe. But I think the power to disbelieve is extremely important. I'm going to say a number which probably isn't true, but may not be far off the truth, in terms of the proportion of things that we believe that are wrong. Mm-hmm. Before I say it, Jamie, what proportion of things, generalizations, not everyday things, but generalizations about the world, would you guess that we believe that are just simply wrong?
Oh, just pure speculation, no evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah, the kind of thing that is not the kind of thing that we're speaking on an expert level about, just to be clear. It's such a good question, because you wonder, what are these like general principles about the way the world works? And of course, there's almost a hierarchy within that. If you believe the world is a fair place, which some people do believe,
Yeah.
that the world is a fair place.
Well, okay. Well, let's leave out the things which are they're not they don't actually have a truth value, as it's called in logic, because whether the world's a fair place or not a fair place can be answered true or false depending on the interpretation of the proposition. But things that could be true or could be actually false, like, for example, without wishing to, let's use this as a hypothetical example, that vaccines do more harm than good, or that homeopathic medicines are effective in treating cancer.
Well, yeah, because I have seen various surveys on this, and of course it depends where you are in the world, what your education level is, and that sort of thing. But let's say in this country, I would say people believing in things that aren't true. Generally, and I don't mean it's going to suddenly be a really offensive statement, but when it comes up with surveys, there are certain other places in the world, let's say when you see surveys come out and they, loads of people believe in sort of ghosts or things.
Well, that's a very nice example.
I don't know how to answer the question. It's quite a big,
broad
question.
Let's say that you've got to answer it because that's the game. And it is a game, obviously. So let's say you believe about, 100,000 things, let's say.
Okay. Yeah.
Of that kind. Roughly, are the false ones, the things that are false? I don't mean you, I mean people generally. Are the false ones going to be like one? Is it one thing that they've got wrong? Is it all of them? Okay, it's neither of those. So it's somewhere between that. Is it 50,000? Is it 20? Is it 80?
Yeah.
Where's the ballpark?
It's a good question because on average, and it will vary so much. I think that in many cases, people believe a huge amount of false propositions. I know I do. But I don't know. I would guess it would be quite high. It might be in the region of 40 to 60%.
Yeah, I would say that too. I mean, it may be higher, but I wouldn't. Obviously, neither of us know the answer to this question. Although it would be quite interesting for someone to look it up. But I think I would guess that I put it this way: I wouldn't be surprised if about half of the things that people believe to be true are not true.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say it isn't half. Let's say it's 20%. Let's say it's 10%. That's still a lot of things that people are confident about and believe to be true that aren't true. And what I think that the implication of that is that we should embrace the power to disbelieve, which doesn't mean to say that never believe anything, which would be obviously absurd. It's be much more willing than we currently are to reserve judgment, to say that, that could be true, but, I'm not sure. And I'll tell you what, some people I talk to find it quite annoying when I do that, I have to say, because I do that quite a lot.
Well, because it stops the natural flow of a argument someone is making, a logical flow of thought. It does stop the train, so when you see people, for example, talking on a show like Question Time, like we have in the UK, where you've got politicians and other public figures who are asked to give their opinion on matters of the day. And they're constantly saying things that the very first thing they've said, you think, well, that's not true. And then everything else is following on from that. And it's like that for a lot of people who are talking on a panel. You're going, and even the way that they're presenting the information, of course, that's their job. They're in a persuasive role. But it is very frustrating as an experience to go, oh, but that's just not true. Why are we even entertaining this
I had
as a concept?
I had to stop watching Question Time because it just, listening to people who don't know what they're talking about, talking with utter confidence about and making statements that are patently, ridiculously not true.
But that's the key, isn't it? That is the key. The confidence of somebody is often what makes them appear. That is part of what makes someone appear like an expert, because experts usually have a certain level of confidence, and you need to be able to persuade people that you know what you're talking about if you constantly undermine yourself. But I think what I'd like to do in the next episode as a sort of a trailer.
Promise.
Yeah, I'm making a promise, because we're recording these back to back. So I feel like I'm going to be able to fulfill this, although, famous last words. But what I want to do in the next episode is look at who we should trust, what characteristics should we trust when someone is talking? What makes us think, oh, this person probably knows a bit more what they're talking about, and what characteristics should we mistrust? So I think that would be quite a fun thing to look at for people next time.
Yeah, I think it would be. And I have been accused, if accused is probably putting it too strongly, of saying things with utter confidence that then turn out not to be true. And they say, you're always so, you're always so confident. You always believe what you say. And I said, well, if I didn't believe it, if I thought it was wrong, I wouldn't believe it and I wouldn't say it. And I think I do come across as someone who has a higher level of confidence and belief in what I'm saying, in the proposition that I'm making, than I actually feel. I'm just putting across a view. And then someone says, well, it's not, that's not right. And then I go, oh, right, okay. That's not right.
Do you know, it's quite an interesting point. But, we'll pick this up next time. This is a two-parter. It's definitely a two-parter. We're not going to go beyond this. And so thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to joining you next time on the Unlocking Behaviour Change podcast.